All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel discussion, where we're answering the question, what impact does diversity, equity, and inclusion have on the success of two-year computing programs? This is a panel discussion that is brought to you by ACM2Y, which is an organization that's kind of a spinoff of ACM, and we focus strictly on computing programs, teaching and learning strategies for two-year higher education institutions. And what that means is that we acknowledge that our population is a little different than your traditional four-year institution, and that's why this conversation is so very important. So what we'll do at this time is we are going to start by introducing ourselves as panelists. We do have a series of prepared questions that we will answer, each of us, and we also welcome your questions in the chat. Feel free. And any input that you'd like to share. We really want this to be an active session, an active discussion, so that we can each take something from our time together today. We do anticipate that this will be no longer than 1 hour. And without further ado, I would like to go ahead and get started with the introductions, and we'll go ahead and start with Dr. Courtney Platts.
Wow, okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Courtney Platts. By trade, I am a privately licensed school psychologist, but my area of research is looking at something called social presence, which is how people communicate in online spaces, and the ethnic components of that communication, whether it's getting your students to respond to an email or whether it's creating an assignment that's engaging based on cultural components of learning. That's what I'm into. So thank you so much for having me.
That sounds so cool. I hadn't heard that introduction, Courtney. I'm gonna pick your brain later.
Oh, cool.
I'm Jill Anderson, and I'm an IT instructor at Brightpoint Community College. I'm actually a new higher ed teacher. My history and my background I'll talk about a little bit later, but is in secondary education in the public school system here. So, um, I just have a little bit of a different perspective coming from a public school system, and then get to the higher ed. So that's why I'm here.
All right, and I am Kenyatta McLeod. I am Associate Professor of Web Design at Brightpoint Community College, where I lead the web design and graphics programs there. So let's go ahead and kick off with our very first question. And that is, how has diversity, equity, or inclusion impacted you in your academic or professional journey?
I'll start. Okay. The first word that came to mind when you sent this question was tremendous. I am thankful for the opportunities that I've been given, and just a little bit of background. I taught in public schools for 19 years. I'm in Virginia. I was born and lived in West Virginia until I was 8, and then I came to Richmond at the age of 8, and then I went to college in Southwest Virginia, which is really rural, and then I started my teaching career in Southwest, which was a very small rural community, which reminded me a lot of the community that I was born in West Virginia, very small, rural. And then when I came back to Richmond, I graduated from Chesterfield County. So then I knew I wanted to come back to Chesterfield County. And my classroom was very different from the 3 years that I had spent in Southwest Virginia, and the classroom that I had in Chesterfield County. And for me, I didn't realize the implicit biases and things that were, because I found through required training. So we had a new principal that came in, and I think it was 2015 when I came to the school in Chesterfield. I had a principal that had been there forever. And so we had a female principal come in, and she saw some major issues, and that we had never even been introduced to the topic of DEI. Inclusion we had because, special ed, we were blended classroom, like those sorts of things. Inclusion, of course. But when it came to diversity and equity, I think equity was always just kind of stuck with the word equal. And that's not what it is. And so when and I'll just never forget when this principal came in, I'm like, I already felt like I've been here. I've been in this game for 10 years. I know this area. I know my students. I taught at Matulga High School was a very small, well, it's not small, but it's in a totally different part of the county than the other part. And so I just felt like, oh, I'm prepared. But come to find out from the incorporation of DEI, I think what she had come through and what she saw that we needed. So through these required professional developments that I was really upset about at first and thought I didn't need, were eye-opening. It started with trauma-informed care and the TED Talks that I would watch, and it just opened my eyes to realize that, I'm a product of systemic racism and I have a lot to learn and I have to be willing to learn it. So I'm so thankful that these topics were brought, even when I might have. It's not that I was against it, but I don't need that. I know I'm fair, I'm nice, and so I have totally changed. I mean, my mission as a teacher is different. I'm so much more student focused now. It's not about me, it's about them. And I I I think it's made me a better leader and even a better parent. Just because I want to change the conversation in my family. And I don't want my kids to have fear. I grew up with fear, and so I just saw what the impact that it did in the classroom, but I just wanted to make, what I learned from my job has I have brought home to my family, and to me that's been an important piece of it too. So it's been tremendous to me in so many ways, in personal ways, professional, academic, what I've learned, my interest. I would have never considered myself an empath. But now, absolutely. And so I thank my principal that I wasn't too fond of at the time, for really pushing me and making us have those hard, difficult conversations that we didn't even know we needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Kenyatta, did you want to go or do you want me to go? Okay. Yeah, so for me, it's slightly different for me, but ditto on the background, came from public school, worked into higher ed, worked up to a director, and then I had a job on a more national level. But kind of slightly juxtaposed to Jill, but DEI work for me, and on some levels, some people see the work that I do as DEI work, some people don't. But for me, the way that this work has impacted my work is that I was just looking at student success and what was missing, right? So we kept doing the same things, whether it was K-12 or higher ed, the same things we kept doing, and they weren't working. So I started to look at what's the one thing that we really haven't looked at, right? And like Jill was sharing, race and inequity, and marginalization, those things, there's no question that those systemic pieces influence our student outcomes. There's no question about that. But I wanted to look at the other side of that. And when you look at the APA said there's two types of marginalization, right? There's the social marginalization, which is what Jill was kind of sharing, is like that systemic racism and stuff like that. But what I was looking at was the APA definition, which is that marginalization is also a response to things like racism or stereotyping or bias. So when I was reading research, for instance, because we're talking about two-year computer programs, I was reading research on something called social presence. And again, that's how real you believe I am right now and how real I believe you are and how connected we are in this space. And when I started looking at that research, it just said that it was a lot of Eurocentricity in it, culture-wise, not race, but culture. And so I started looking at these things, and me, I'm biracial. My mom is white, my dad is African American. And so I've kind of flowed in these kind of two polar opposite worlds all of my life. And when I started my research, my main question, because I have a lot of educators on both sides of my family, and I just started asking people, why don't you like DEI training? What is it that you don't like, right? And so I was starting to get these answers. And I realized that, there's definitely, again, we have to address all of those things that Jill was talking about. And I'm grateful for her principle for kind of, moving that forward. But there's this whole other side on the teaching and learning side. And that's how it's impacted me. And personally, as an educator and as a student, I do have a learning disability. So I have used things like accommodations. I still got my PhD. I'm still a licensed psychologist. And that's one of the reasons that I did that, was because I understood the inequity in things like online learning in the 2000s, where I was asking for things that just didn't exist, or people were just telling me no because it's not the same, or, whatever those things may be. So, but I think that there's two conversations we had, which is the marginalization of the systemic piece, again, that Jill was kind of talking about, but there's also that response, right? Because and take race out of it for a second, take anything else out of it. We all had that experience during COVID, right? COVID happened and we were all used to a particular culture. And what happened was that culture was removed from you. So if you're a routine person, you missed giving high fives, you missed pulling into your parking space, you missed that. And where a lot of institutions made a mistake was they said, we're going to remove this culture from you, and we're expecting you to rebuild that in your house. And so you responded to that change in one of four ways. You either said, yes, this is my Super Bowl, or you took a deep breath and said, this couldn't possibly last till, next fall, so I'm okay for now. Some of you were like, I'm absolutely not doing it. Here's your final. I'll see you in the fall. And then some people who were very productive in that face-to-face space just stopped being productive because that change was too great. And that was a response to the cultural shift. And so when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion in the teaching classroom, particularly in the sciences, it's a lot of process, right? So we have to look at the deliverables, how we're delivering it, and are we delivering content in a way that reduces those barriers to learning, particularly when there's a cultural change in place, whether that's going from face-to-face to online learning, or whether that's going from maybe I was at a, like Jill shared, I was in a school that was over here in this region, it was rural, and now I'm in this urban area, or vice versa. So that would be my experience with diversity, equity, inclusion.
Thank you both. And I think I would be remiss to let us continue with the jargon of DEI without kind of explaining what it is. So when we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is really understanding that varying perspectives and experiences create value. So valuing the differences rather than being intimidated or fearful of those differences. When we move into equity, that's more so about eliminating the barriers so that everyone can get equal access. And in our instance, talking about two-year computing programs, identifying what those barriers are and then filling in the gaps so that everyone, no matter where they sit or their purview, they have equal access. And then we have inclusion. And this is having folks feel feelings of acceptance, safety, being affirmed, and just being empowered by that community. And in our example, that learning community, really feeling that sense of community, no matter their differences. Okay, so I would be remiss. So I'm going to go ahead and let go of this so that we can kind of be full screen here. And I'll stop sharing. There we go. All right. So my response to the question I'm going to focus in on diversity and how it has impacted me specifically in my undergraduate studies. For your institution, you know, you're doing the typical 120 credits. And in that experience, I can tell you that I had a total of 2 instructors that looked like me. And the one was a man, one was a woman. And I literally probably last year emailed the woman instructor, Professor Weather, to let her know that I made it. I'm a professor now, and it's because I saw you represented in my classroom. Seeing you showed me, wait, I could teach college. So representation really matters. So that diversity piece, if it were not being able to visually see, I think, what do they say? You can't be what you can't see, right? Without being able to see that, I might be in New York dancing, right? Because that was my other dream. But yes, the representation made such a huge difference. And so that speaks to, you know, those folks, those decision makers that are making those policies and things. Like, think about that team. Representation makes a huge difference. And so we'll move on to our next question. How would you describe the importance of DEI in two-year computing programs specifically?
Well, specifically, and I'm not sure where everyone is from. I know Dr. Plotz is not in Virginia, but in Virginia, um, thankfully, there's a lot of opportunities right now for folks to go back to school in these high demand areas, IT, computers, to go back for free. Um, and it's for all, so it's so important now because these opportunities are there and we're leveraging them, and we have these students coming, and once they get on our campus, we need to continue to make them feel welcome and that they're supposed to be there, that they see something that, you know, that we're making sure that, you know, if the professor doesn't look just like them, they need to know where that professor stands and if they're going to have an equal voice, because if they're different, you know, and that's just, it's something that I'll talk about it later, is just I'm very clear from the beginning that, you know, we all have a voice, and you know, respect is given, it's going to be received, you know, so on and so forth. But it's, you know, coming from a public school system, you always talk in about your community, you kind of like know your little community. Well, here at Bright Point in Virginia, I might have students in totally different states. I might have people just in different parts of our central Virginia area, and it's completely the culture is so different. And I cannot get over just, and also the different languages that are spoken. And so I I've said it from the beginning, and I'm not quite sure that Bright Point is the most welcoming campus, but I think that we have taken strides in that in our CTL and with the PD opportunities, and we're really trying. And I'm thankful for our leadership because they listen to that. You know, they're not only just trying to increase enrollment, but you know, our thing is a, you know, a success story for every student. And and that really means every student. And I just feel that at Bright Point. And so I just think it's important, especially in Virginia right now. You know, there's so many opportunities for everyone to get a free education right now. And we need to make it, you know, rigorous, but, you know, also equitable and accessible for all. And I think the pandemic hit on all that. And so I'm just really proud, you know, I'm not trying to sell Bright Point, but I'm just really proud to be a part of Bright Point, just for that fact that we are really trying to meet every student where they are, um, and and do it in the right way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think for any two-year program, it's important, but I think one of the challenges for instructors, when someone says something like DEI, that's just such a huge term. It's a huge term and it's a heavy term. And so the truth is that everyone can't be everything to everyone. And nobody wants to say that, but as a psychologist and as someone who works with faculty and faculty wellness, you can't be everything to everyone. So the question is what can you be genuinely and consistently in your classroom? So like, for instance, one of the things that I talk about with DEI is I like simple things. I like things that faculty can do in less than 5 minutes. And also, again, it just has to be something for faculty. I can't get too much on my soapbox, but anyway, but one of the things is to kind of embody DEI or equity specifically. Faculty will do their first day spiel and they have their syllabus and they'll say something about flexibility, but they never define it. And so what happens over a 16-week period? Well, for me, maybe I think that flexibility means that you're going to give me an extra 10 minutes after the deadline, but someone else is going to say, oh, flexibility is whatever I want it to be, right? Well, that right there is not necessarily equal, right? So now it's kind of creating a perception. So when you work with each group of students each term and you say, okay, what does flexibility mean for you? Because you might have a group of students who 80% of them is like, yeah, we can just turn stuff on time. We're adults. We got it. We're good. But then you might have this other teaching that exact same class, and it might be like, hey, listen, my kids, my co-parent just left. I'm changing jobs. Flexibility is going to look a lot different in that classroom. Additionally, one of the things that I look at is, when we're talking about teaching and learning, and you read the research, a lot of it is based on critical thinking. You'll hear critical thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking. And again, my mom's mom is from Germany. She immigrated here. I have nothing wrong with European people. I am half European myself. But when we look at who we're teaching versus our teaching methods, the majority of critical thinking is really dominant in European cultures and individualistic cultures. But when we look at people from more collective cultures, they usually use divergent thinking before critical thinking. So if you're not sure how, and you might notice you're teaching and you say, okay, I'm going to give you the facts and I'm going to show you how to do this. And I want you to give that back to me. If you don't know how to elicit divergent thinking, which is out of the box thinking, creative thinking, and kind of rein it back in, it's a lot more difficult to get that to stick. And that's because of language acquisition. That's how we know that, because in language acquisition, depending on whether you're bilingual or just how you gain language, even if it's the same language, right? And we do see these same differences in rural parts of America, like Appalachia versus New York City, because that language component is completely different. And so that's some of the things. And we keep saying, well, oh, it's because the students are from here, or it's because the students are from there. No, it's because faculty are working at a significant disadvantage because they're still using methods like Bloom's that's from 1955 that doesn't have that cultural component to it. Does that mean we throw away Bloom's? Absolutely not. It means we put in the components that we need to be reflective of the people in front of us. And I get very leery with a lot of DEI work for faculty, because I know for myself, even when I've been training at places and then people invite me to come to things, it just seems like a lot of DEI work is a full overhaul of everything. And especially after COVID, nobody has the bandwidth for that unless they want to. There are some people who are just like, oh my gosh, I get it. I'm throwing everything away. I'm starting over. But if it doesn't work for the faculty, it's not going to work for the student. And so DEI is just so large that everyone, no matter where you're from or what your background is, you can find something that will work for you and work for your students. And so that's and especially in two-year programs, because two-year programs, this is what I love about two-year programs. Two-year programs can set you up for the rest of your life, or two-year programs can set you up for the rest of your life. That's what I love about them, right? Because you can do the 2 years and say, I'm done. I've accomplished something. I have a job. I'm taking care of my family. Or you can say, I have a 2-year. I loved it. I'm going for a 4-year. I'm going for a master's. I'm going for a doctorate. And I loved it. Right. And I'm a product of community college. I don't know where I would be without my local community college in New Jersey. So shout out to ACCC if you're watching.
Yeah, so in terms of two-year computing program specifically with DEI, I think um, at the two-year level, our population is quite different. We have learners from varying ages, varying life circumstances, enduring various seasons of life. We have folks who have children, might be caretakers, maybe doing both. We have working professionals that are looking to enhance their career, learning new skills. We have folks who are fresh out of college or high school, or maybe still in high school. So our range goes really, really wide. And so because of that, that whole equity piece, diversity is already there. But that equity piece is something that I think is so critical to the two-year programs. We have to begin to think about the different barriers that our learners are encountering and enduring, whether that be personal, academic, it doesn't matter. So we have to design our courses to be able to kind of wrap around and embrace those challenges. So some of the things about late policies, how we offer courses, and so much more can really having those conversations can really help us embrace DEI. In terms of inclusion in computing programs, that's a STEM topic, right? We already know when it comes to the differences between male and female. There's a huge gap there, not only in those pursuing the programs, but also in the pay once you get the degree. And so what can we do? And that's something I don't have a solution for. What can we do to be able to design coursework, market our programs to attract and to let folks know that are not typical folks that are going to grab these opportunities to let them know, hey, you're welcome here. Your perspective, man, you can do this. You can code. You can do cyber. Like you can do whatever. Just kind of eliminate that whole concept of stereotype threat to entry into these programs. So we're moving into a little game. We're going to call it a DEI game. And we're going to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. And it's really about our computing classrooms and the actual strategies that we're using in our courses or that we can recommend for folks to use in our computing courses. So this is where a lot of the takeaways come into play for us. So that very first question, why is diversity an important component of the computing classroom? And I'm going to put it right here in the chat. And what strategies can we use to amplify it, meaning diversity, in your computing classroom? So just share a strategy.
For anybody, or is the panel specifically?
The panel, and if anyone wants to chime
Okay, I just want
in,
to make
let's
sure.
have the
I didn't want to.
conversation. Yeah.
Jill, do you want to go first again? Or okay, all right. So diversity. So one of the things that I think is one of the most challenging things now after COVID is to get students to work in groups effectively, because everyone has kind of their people adversity thing. And one of the activities that I love the most, I use it all the time, and I can send you an outline. Actually, I'm working on one right now, but it's called a discussion. And Jill, I don't know if you've ever done this in the schools, because I've seen it done in K-12 too, but it's called a discussion clock. And so what you do is you take a piece of paper and you tell your students to make 4 squares, right? Just a line down the middle. And then you put 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, right? Or whatever times, doesn't matter. And you tell them that they have to get up. And I can't, it's too long to explain if you're doing online, but I can send you a document on it. But basically, you tell them to get up, and they can't make appointments with anyone to their left or their right, right? But they can make appointments with anybody else. And so what's great about that activity, so they go around, they put a name, right? So let's say I go up to Donna, I say, Donna, do you have a 12 o'clock? Donna says, yes. I write Donna's name down. Donna writes my name down. And then we go back, right? So now as the instructor, what I'm doing is I'm putting up content for each of those appointments. So if it's something that is new for the students, if it's a novel concept, I might only put 1 or 2 questions or prompts on each section, right? Because I'm just introducing them. So maybe the first one is a couple multiple choice questions. The second one is just a brief reading that they can get information from. The third one might be a discussion. And the fourth one is, maybe start, picking a topic or something like that. But the reason this is good for computing classes is because when there are students that may have undiagnosed challenges with memory, right? Or maybe some undiagnosed learning disorder or even diagnosed learning disorder. This is a great activity because if there's something sequential, maybe you're trying to teach them the code and there's 5 steps, then you make 5 appointments and they're actually doing the 5 steps. So it's more likely that they're going to recall those 5 steps instead of saying, hey, this is these 5 steps. And I'm not going to lie to you, as an instructor, I love using that technique because all I'm doing is saying, hey, it's time to move your 12 o'clock appointment. And I watch everybody get up, and then I can actually walk around and see, okay, most of the people got that first one right. We're good with that, right? I can see that. And you say, Courtney, well, how do I do that in a class of 250? Or how do I do that in an online class? I can tell you that at a different time. I don't want to take up all the time, but it's just a really, really simple thing. And the students love it because they're moving, it's brain-based learning. And again, I've done it up to 10 appointments when it's something that I really want to make sure that they get. And if it's something that has that math component in, again, I love using it in math because if you're trying to teach an equation, then step 1 is 12 o'clock, right? Step 2 is 3 o'clock. And so it gives the actual steps instead of you on the board doing it yourself saying, okay, do you got it? Now it's your turn. We're moving on to a different topic, right? So it's a way to slow down the curriculum, get your students to get ownership of it. And again, are you doing that every single time? No, you're not. But for the topic that they're struggling with, or just to get some movement, right? Because when our students sit too long, the blood does not go to the brain. They start to fall asleep. They start to give us the deadpan. So if you can get them up and get them moving, it's a good thing. And what I love about that is your lazy students, you'll know who they are instantly. If you do that on the front, you'll know who they are instantly because they don't move. They don't move. They're just like, I'll wait for people to come to me, right? So you're like, okay, I might have to motivate you. You might have to be on my high flyer list. You get more emails from anybody else because you are going to be my one who's right, not giving myself on time. And I also love it for students who may have different types of different levels of accessibility in the classroom, right? Because for someone who may have, like, let's just say it's just a sports injury, right? It's not a lifelong thing, but maybe they're on a 504 and they can't walk around the classroom. Well, people can come to them and they can engage with them, and they're asked to engage with them, and people don't like to be left out. So towards the end, they always do it. They'll yell across the room, who has a 4 o'clock? Who has a 6 o'clock? And the last thing about that is there's always going to be somebody left out at the end, always, because it's never even, and they're doing their own thing. So you tell them that up front. You say, listen, this is not, someone's going to be left out. We're going to have a couple of people left out. Don't worry, I've got you. So if everybody, at the end still has a space left, you just tell them you meet with who you want to meet with at that time. Right. And see where they go. Make sure that because if they're kind of struggling, then it's like, okay, maybe they're new here, right? It's telling you stuff that you wouldn't otherwise know, right? So just kind of giving an instructor just a different sense of who's in the classroom, how they operate, instead of being like, okay, I'm throwing you in random groups. Now we're going to do stuff. It forces the social skills, it forces the partnership, it forces the staggered learning, the interwoven competencies, which is super, super important for anything that has a systematic presentation for learning. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. I had totally forgot about the clock, but I used it for a different thing where, I mean, you have high school kids and they always want to work with their same friends, but I mean, you're right. People don't want to work in a group, and we would just do the clock, but I would make them keep their clock, and I would say, okay, on this assignment, you're going to work with your 3 and your 4 or whatever, so you always, they're going to meet with 12 different people. So I love that, but I love how you broke that down into this. That's good.
Thank
My my example is just simply, I look at I use a lot of examples, a lot of practical examples. Like I teach Microsoft Excel, for example. Um, I have, and one of the first things that we do that I teach them is just, you know, when we're covering formulas, we set up a budget and just going through the different budget items. I had to be really careful with that because, you got to think it, everybody has a little bit different items on their budget. And, you know, you got to be kind of careful about, do you want to include this or do you not want to include this? But then you want to make sure that everybody feels included. So I had to adjust my budget lesson a little bit. And I made it more of a whiteboard, and where people, it was anonymous and they would just put up their different items of things that are on their budget. Instead of being like, hey, Kenyatta, what is something that is on your budget that you don't see on mine? Or, because it could be something, as simple as I might put childcare on my, but that might be something that is very sensitive to another student in my classroom. So adding that, just that little piece of anonymity to a line item on a budget could make them, they feel like they can participate. Their example is going to be included, and I learn, and everybody else kind of learns from it too. So I've just been really careful about the examples that I use, calling on certain students, because my classes are a lot of high flex. So I have students in person, online, in Zoom. Um, and so it's really hard to gauge their comfort level. And just saying, oh, you can put it in the chat, their name is on the chat, so that doesn't help either. So I use the little whiteboard a lot and let them use sticky notes. Simply using the names, you know, just picking different names, different countries for my examples. Everything does not happen in America, so just simple things like, just bringing in different holidays. Um, I felt terrible, several years ago for a discussion. I asked about, I was teaching a summer school class. What are you doing for Independence Day? And how offensive that was to some students. And so, and I'll give this to you later, but it's, you have to be okay with that. You don't know what you don't know. And you have to be okay to learn, and you have to be like, I mean, that was, I'll never do that again. But I learned something, and then from there, I'm able to just completely change that whole discussion piece. But mine's been a lot of just, the textbook examples, and you just get used to doing the same things over and over. But I was really leaving a lot of students out, and a lot of situations that I didn't even know about. So um, I am definitely all about the, you don't know what you don't know, and so be open to finding it out.
Yeah, I think for a diversity strategy that I use, and this kind of jumps off of what you were saying about doing the same things over and over and over again. I give my students the opportunity to kind of choose their own projects, so long as they meet the final criteria. And what this does for them is they are able to, so more specifically, they create websites. There's not this static website that everybody's building together. It's you create the vision, you code it out, and that's it. And so they are able to take what we're learning. Everybody's learning the same things, everyone's given the same set of resources, but they're creating these very different sites. And everybody's kind of at the same level more often than not. And so to be able to see what everyone is creating with the same set of instruction, the same assignments, it makes for a really beautiful ending to the semester. So taking the time to really evaluate, here are my assignments. What value are these assignments really adding to the experience? Because you get to kind of debunk some of the maybe myths or biases that you have. When it's like student X, you might have had some, thoughts about student X when you first popped in, but then they create this masterpiece and everybody gets to see, it's like, oh, I was wrong. I judged, so it's a beautiful thing when you allow the students to kind of own their work. So moving on to equity, why is equity important? And how can we amplify equity in our classrooms?
Mm. Do we like unmute at the same time, Courtney? I'm sorry. Um, I think the pandemic put a huge exclamation point on this, with the inequities that is totally in our system. I mean, we thought, oh, give every student a Chromebook, they'll be fine. Well, not every student has internet, you know. Um, not every student speaks English. Not, not every mom and dad that is at home helping them. So I think that I am so grateful for the pandemic because I do think it really opened a lot of eyes that were just refusing to be opened to the accessibility piece that just it really isn't there. And in IT, I'm always very careful about, I think we can't assume that everybody is starting at the same place with the same resources. You know, just because a student comes in with a laptop, it used to be, oh, he knows what he's doing. He's got a laptop, or he's going to be able to do that because he has a laptop. Well, it could be a Chromebook, and there might not be anything they can do with it. There's certain things. So I think now giving access to our students to OER resources free, there's so much good stuff out there that is just as good as that $145 textbook, so making that accessible to everybody, finding the OERs, finding the, um, things that are available. And also for software, thankfully the VCCS, they all get free Microsoft Office. But just making sure that I am not requiring anything extra from my students, and also easy to borrow the technology. So many times I've heard professors say, oh, well, you could just, if you don't have that, you just go to the lab. Just go to the lab and do it. That's not an appropriate answer. So thankfully our library works really well, and we're able to check. They've ordered hundreds and hundreds of extra laptops. They are on board with this so that our students can have exactly what they need, when they need, where they need it, and they don't just come on campus. So just giving that access, meeting them where they are, and just not assuming that we're all starting, with the same resources. Something as simple as the internet, just assuming that everybody has the internet, it's not okay. It's not okay.
Yeah, so with equity, I'm always challenged because I've just trained faculty so much that usually the pushback on equity is like, well, nobody bought me a computer. Nobody did that for me. So why, and as a psychologist, I'm always curious. I'm like, tell me more about that. Did you want someone to buy you a computer? Like what? Like let's dig a little deeper. But the truth is I agree with a lot of what Jill said, and I'd like to add to it just by saying, we it's not necessary. It's really it, and I know a lot of people don't like this word, but it really does come down to access. But I have always felt like this as an instructor. If I can ignite your love for my subject matter, you will want, crave, find access. It doesn't mean it's available to you, but my job as the instructor is to just ignite a passion in you. And I know that it's there, and we all know that it's there because it works totally in the reverse as well, right? If they think they need to get something done and they plagiarize and they do it, they can do it. They find a way to do it. They find a way to do it. So they have the ability to do it. And so it's the equity is, am I giving consistent, and for me, it's am I giving consistently passionate instruction, or am I only doing that to the students who I believe are giving me the audience to do that? Right. So like when COVID, it's like what Jill was saying about COVID, is like, people were so upset that students' screens weren't on. And I said to so many administrators, but can you control what's on the other side? right? Because here in Florida, we had a case where we had a mom, she's on a Zoom call, and her husband came and shot her in the head in a meeting. Now, right now, we're in this meeting, and I preface this for all of you when we're talking about equity. This is more for the faculty members than it is for the students. Right now, if I'm your student or you're the faculty member and something is happening to me, I can almost bet my life on it that your crisis policy does not include this space. So if one of you is having a health emergency, I have no clue where you are. I have no clue what the policy is. And in most of the cases that we were working on at my old job, just working through policy, what it came down to for the insurance is who sent the link and whose name is on the link. So when we're talking about, that safety piece, that's part of that equity is what, are your residential counselors aware of how to provide telehealth? Do you know how to get in touch with them? If you have a student who's saying that they're suicidal and it's the end of your class and it's 10 o'clock at night online, is there some sort of mechanism? Is it, and you can look into this yourself. It's free usually at your local YMCA. There's something called mental health first aid. I'm sure, Jill, you probably are familiar with that being from the school system, but basically just like you'd give first aid to someone who's choking, this is for mental health. So it teaches you the right questions to ask. And for some schools, districts, states, it's part of a liability policy for yourself. So, but I really just urge you. The other thing is when we're talking about equity, it's the our incarcerated population. So 10 years ago, the reason I got into this work was because we were working with a school in New Mexico. Is an online school. The student was she was in elementary. Her dad was on house arrest and was not allowed to have access to schools. Well, it's a small town. Someone knew the story, saw him in the background, and they said that he had access to children. And so he went back in. And so we were working with the school just to try to understand, what was the policy. So when we have students who are on house arrest or who have felonies, depending on the school, depending on the access, like if you have someone with dual enrollment or something like that, or maybe there's kids, I have kids in the background, or maybe Kenyatta has kids in the background, but I'm the felon, then that's, so there are all these things that when we talk about equity, they have long-reaching implications. And whether it's faculty safety or or parole, stuff with parole, like it gets really hairy. So, equity is not just the, hey, can you get computer access, right? That's our best. If that's our only problem, to buy you some computers and that is our access problem, we are in a good spot. Right? If that's if we have to get you internet and computers, boom, and that's it. But when you start looking into the mental health piece and you start looking into these other pieces, and we've really put faculty as a whole at a disadvantage because it's like, oh yeah, you meet from 7:30 to 9:30 at night. Well, when do students want to talk to us? After class. Well, now it's 11 o'clock your time. You've been up since 6. And now how does it start? Oh, I just have a question, Mr. Pulley. I just have a question, right? Now it's 12:30 and you're crying and you're telling me that your dog has passed and you're going to be homeless and your mental health and you can't afford your medication. What are you supposed to do at 12 o'clock? And I really urge you, go back to your campuses, ask them about that policy, protect yourselves, protect your students, because it's a lot. It's a lot.
I really appreciate that angle on the mental health component. I think it's something that we often lose sight of alongside the equity discussion. My take on equity is really just about flexibility. I acknowledge personally, I would not have been able to pursue a higher education, my graduate studies, if it were not for online learning. And that is why I continue to live in this space, thrive in this space, because I want those folks who have situations similar to my own to still be able to thrive. And so in those spaces for online, some strategies, adding checklists in your classes, chunking material so that you can have short, brief lessons, even something as should be common practice, captioning, Because what if you're at your child's practice, you don't have headphones, but you still need to get your work done? You should be able to play it, mute it, and watch it right then and there. And that kind of has moved me into the space of my new thing, which is HighFlex, which I just love. And Jill mentioned it as well. Like, it's a great equity supported modality. Like, no matter what's going on, I tell everyone email is my nemesis, right? My inbox is a dumpster fire. And so what I try to do is find, how can I get rid of these emails? And so the emails about, oh, my car broke down. Oh, I'm sick and I can't make, I don't need any of those because of the HighFlex modality. It's while it is serving me in that way, it's serving the students. It's serving all of us. We're all on the same team. We're all doing the same assignments. And we're all yielding the same results, no matter how we choose to enter into the classroom. So I strongly encourage everyone to kind of just look into HighFlex just to see if it's something you might consider, because it really promotes equity in the classroom, especially technology where you have to pause, rewind, replay. All of your lectures are recorded. So imagine being able to replay or search a transcript. I know she talked about arrays, but I need to see that again, and being able to slow that down. Like, the impact that it can have on learning is fantastic. And so the very last question that we have relates to inclusion, and again, how we can amplify this in our classrooms.
I'll make mine quick. I just like the idea, again, I like things that are 5 minutes or less for faculty because they're super busy. I love the idea of normalizing accommodations. There's not one person on this call who has not asked for accommodation in their lifetime, whether it's, hey, I'm running 5 minutes late, or hey, can you help me carry the groceries in? Or hey, there's not one person. And so the language around accommodation in the syllabus, in my syllabi, when I have the opportunity to create them myself, is just that. It literally says just that. We have all asked for an accommodation, and these are the accommodations that I can provide without barrier. And I list those out, right? And again, if the accommodations that Kenyatta provide don't work for you, then they're not going to work. So you have to know, some people are this flexible, some people are this flexible. Both are okay, but you have to be able to be consistently applying that, right? For the inclusion piece. And so, because historically it's like, and if you need accommodations, you know who you are. And if you so need those, then then you know what to do, as opposed to, we've all asked for it. We've all, we might not have done it in the sphere of the, ADA accommodations, but this is what I can do without you having to go to the office. And I am very passionate about that, because outside psychological testing is extremely expensive. An outside autism eval can run anywhere from $1,500 to $2,200, and that's cash. It is not covered by insurance. Just for your average run-of-the-mill learning disability, if it's not coming out of the public school. And a lot of colleges don't take reports from the public school. They want an outside independent evaluation. So that runs anywhere from $500 to $900. So I, in effect, when I'm practicing, I am the gatekeeper to the access. And so the more that you can understand accommodations that you can provide that work for you as an instructor, and the way that your class is set up, and that will work for things like dyslexia, ADHD, autism, any of those things that you can do that take down that barrier, is my inclusion tip.
That's awesome. I like that. I one thing that this isn't as easy to do in like a virtual HighFlex, but and you talked about it earlier, Courtney, was just setting the norms. Um, you can teach, like she said, you can teach the exact same subject, but in two different class periods. So I had, for example, I taught a dual enrollment. I was teaching college level database programming. And you wouldn't think you'd have these like really weird situations, but we actually had a student who, and I can't think of the phobia. Courtney, you might know it, but he was terrified of fruits and vegetables. And um, it was so cool because I had the exact same class And at the beginning, we set the norms, and the norms are, we will all be, I mean, this sounds silly, like in college, but like in high school, I mean, you have to be very clear, like, you're going to be marked tardy if you're not in your seat when the bell rings, or something silly like that. But the peers around this student knew that they needed to make a norm to support their peer by saying no food or drink be allowed during class. I didn't even have to say it. They did, because they knew. And so letting them be a part of what the norms are for that class period is huge. And I'm really big on names. I use name cards at the beginning. They put them on the top of their monitors. I want to make sure I can pronounce them. I want to make sure I'm using the right ones. And just, meaning what I say, as far as, I will meet you where you are. And I've gotten feedback from students that you really do mean that. Like, you really will meet me where I am. And so, Courtney, I really think I'm going to take your advice too about listing the accommodate. Like, that's great, because, and Kenyatta too, with the high flex, like, I'll take late work. I'm not going to assign you anything that I don't want you to do. It's important. So yeah, absolutely. But every class is different, and just giving them the opportunity to kind of set their own norms and be inclusive with each other.
Well, out of respect for the time, with there's 4 minutes left, I don't want to get started on my response there. I just want to take a moment to show everyone the ACM2Y website. So allow me to share my screen. If you would like to join us for future discussions, feel free to stay tuned here. Give me just a moment. acm2y.acm.org. You'll see recordings from our prior events, a few posts, and if you want to join us, there's no cost at all. You can join ACM2Y. We do have a listserv. It's how we communicate. So you can share resources with one another in this space. And we just like to continue the conversation. So thank you all so very much for your attentiveness today. Thank you, Dr. Klotz. Thank you, Jill, for serving as panelists. And just thank you so very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Kenyatta.
I just wanted to say thanks to everybody as well. Just been a fascinating discussion to watch up here north of the border. So it was interesting listening to everybody's experiences with DEI, and caused me to do a little reflection on my own. And we come from a little different perspective up here, but for the past 10 years, we've had a very heavy influx of foreign students in the community college system in Ontario, just to help us pay the bills. So,
Sure.
Right.
so it's really been fascinating to listen to everybody here, and then reflecting on that myself, of what I've done and what I haven't done and what I should do. So thanks very much to everybody.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.